The husband found out that his wife was unfaithful, and this might have been going on for a long time. Let's listen to their story. I'm 47 years old, and my wife is 45. We had a happy marriage for 22 years, and we're proud parents of 3 kids, a 20-year-old son, and 2 lovely daughters, aged 18 and 16. However, something significant happened on September 2001. On that day, my wife had planned to meet a man she met online at a nearby hotel. It was clear they wanted to have an affair because they had been exchanging texts and photos for several months. At that time, we had only been married for 2 years, and our son wasn't even a year old. It's hard to believe how different things were back then. Surprisingly, the tragic incident involving the New York Towers prevented her from going through with her plans. Her uncle was on the 84th floor of the South Tower and died instantly in the fall. The whole country mourned, and my wife was deeply affected by this news. I sympathized with her and supported her during this tough time. Overwhelmed by guilt, she eventually confessed her intentions to me and expressed deep regret. She assured me that their relationship hadn't gone beyond the emotional stage and even provided evidence to prove it. Before her confession, I had a vague feeling that something was wrong, but I never suspected she was emotionally involved with someone else. This revelation shocked me because I thought I knew my wife well. She had a strict upbringing that discouraged parties, drinking, and dating. She told me I was her first romantic partner when we started our relationship. After her confession on September 11th, I began to question everything I knew about her. If not for the tragedy, she might have gone through with her plan, and I wouldn't have suspected a thing. To consider reconciliation, I made it clear that she needed to see a psychologist. Despite this, I didn't see concrete evidence of her taking steps to address the issues that led to her actions. The betrayal remained a painful memory. Eventually, she did seek help from a psychologist and showed genuine remorse. We worked on healing our relationship, but trust, once broken, is fragile. We managed to smooth things out, but our trust was never the same. 19 years passed, and we had 2 more children. But on October 14th, 2019, that familiar feeling of doubt resurfaced, causing anxiety. Intuition can be unsettling, especially when it questions the stability of our relationship. One Monday morning, tensions escalated when our 18-year-old daughter had a heated argument with my wife before heading to school. Later, I made a mistake and tried to defuse the situation by playing with the family dog, which made our daughter burst out laughing. Surprisingly, my wife's reaction was unexpected. Overwhelmed with strong emotions, she looked upset and distant. To my surprise, the first alarm bell was her decision to disable the location data exchange function on her phone, which we used to track each other's location. This sudden change in behavior caused an instinctive feeling of anxiety. The trust we had been rebuilding needed more attention. Driven by the need to find clarity and confidence, I started looking for ways to access her phone, computer, and any other devices that could help resolve the situation. My actions were motivated by the desire to understand a situation where our relationship was again seriously tested. Today, we had to take our youngest to the post office to get a passport for her school trip. Since my wife works at the school where our daughter studies, she kindly offered to take her there, and I met them at the designated location. Both of us needed to be there for this task, but all the while, she seemed detached and distant. While we waited, there was an unsettling silence in the car, broken only by her periodic phone calls. It was clear she was engaged in correspondence with someone, which raised concerns in my mind, and a desire to check her phone to ease my worries. She used to leave her phone unattended at home, but lately she carried it everywhere. This change added to my unease. I also recalled her recent purchase of an iPad for her work, which I set up for her. We had discussed this acquisition multiple times, so her desire for it wasn't a surprise. Alongside her phone, the iPad became her constant companion, which she carried around the house. At one point, she left it unattended on the table, allowing me to investigate further. To my surprise, I found it locked with a code. This was unusual for us since we usually don't use codes on our devices. She explained it was because confidential student information was on the iPad, which made sense. However, there was still the possibility she used it for other purposes. On a Friday, we planned to meet at the bank to finalize a loan for our new house. After returning home, she mentioned having an errand to run. Curious, I checked our bank account and discovered that one of her errands was a visit to an adult store. This immediately raised suspicions. When I had the chance, I discreetly searched through her purchases and found beautiful underwear. Our life in bed was stagnant. mainly due to her lack of desire. This discovery led to a conversation. Frustrated by our lack of closeness, I decided to consult a doctor about it. During my research, I stumbled upon several websites discussing low libido in women. This piqued my curiosity and led me to dig deeper. I tried to observe her actions without being noticed, and eventually discovered the access code to her iPad while she was with our daughter. With caution and determination, I accessed the device and saw a Facebook message from a stranger, asking her to send a photo. Strangely, the app showed they weren't Facebook friends, which left me puzzled. It could have been a random person, but her reaction indicated she knew this individual. The conversation quickly became open, and when he suggested that she should leave our daughter and be with him instead of keeping this information and its source hidden for better understanding, I made a hasty decision to confront her that evening. Unfortunately, this turned out to be a big mistake as she lied about it and took immediate action. The affair remained a secret from others. She claimed the lingerie was for us, and she was trying to build up the courage to wear it for me. She said the person on Facebook was a former colleague from a summer job who suddenly started messaging her. She swore that their communication was only through texts and didn't involve any physical contact. Although I wanted to believe her, I found it hard to accept her explanations. I told her firmly that all of this needed to stop completely and immediately, and she agreed. The next day, I asked if the affair had truly ended, and she assured me it had. She didn't know I had seen their messages. Using other methods, I discovered that she had told him to unfriend her on Facebook due to my demands, which meant she had lied to me. And here I am, 19 years later, facing a situation that feels all too familiar at this moment. My emotions are a mess, and I'm confused. My appetite has decreased, I can't sleep well, and I find it hard to concentrate. To cope with this, I've scheduled consultations for myself later this week and started spending more time at the gym. This situation is extremely painful, and I don't want to deal with it. Since the day I learned the truth, I've been reading Psalm 81 almost daily. Initially, for several days, I managed to handle the situation relatively well, but today was especially tough. I barely slept last night, which worsened my emotional turmoil. On a brighter note, our son, who was born before the first affair, surprised us by giving us tickets to an event. He currently works at a nearby theater, and we were happy to attend the play Come From Away. We decided to pretend we were happy because it was an unexpected gift from him in his early 20s. He's an exceptional person, and we didn't want to disappoint him with a refusal or lack of enthusiasm. If you're not familiar with the production, it's based on the events of the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attack. It's worth mentioning that the date is historically significant, as are the feelings I had when we bought the tickets. Constant reminders of that specific date and time, as well as a recently reopened painful wound, kept me from fully immersing myself in what was happening in different circumstances, in a different environment. I might have found pleasure in today's outing, but from the beginning, I wished to be anywhere but in that theater. To ease the discomfort, I started documenting my observations, noting dates, times, and my thoughts in a journal. I even developed a personal mantra to help me deal with similar situations. Stay calm, stay patient, stay in control. I realize I need to be more consistent in applying this mantra, but I'm working on it diligently. I've made significant progress in improving my thinking. Now, as we get ready for our evening shopping, I'm determined to change my perspective on what's happening as a result of my investigation. It turns out that her interactions with other men occurred during a summer school program where she worked as a teacher's assistant. During this program, she connected with a physical education teacher who turned out to be 32 years old, while my wife, who behaved inappropriately, is 47 years old. This situation can be described as her playing the role of a cougar. Her partner is a physical education teacher at a nearby school, while my wife works at another school, not even in the same district. She crossed paths with him during their joint participation in the summer school program, which accepts applications from teachers and staff from various districts who want to participate. This unique setup allows people with different levels of education to work together who wouldn't typically cooperate. I knew he would be in the program, but chose to keep that knowledge to myself. At the moment, she remains unaware of my awareness. I decided to pay closer attention to their interactions, and eventually found a message from her to him on Facebook with very interesting content. To my surprise, he seemed to brush her off, which made me smile. This led me to believe he saw her more as a friend and wanted to avoid a romantic relationship, considering their significant age difference. She's 47, about 15 years older than him. My belief is based on previous messages where she mentioned going camping overnight, and he didn't respond. Later, I learned that she had told him about the trip. We had a few family conversations, but she didn't seem to share my perspective. However, I haven't made a final decision yet, even though I feel it's getting close. With significant life changes on the horizon, I believe it's crucial to have a well-established network of information sources. To do this, I use tools like voice recorders, GPS, navigation devices, electronic codes, and so on. My goal is to gather as much concrete evidence as possible before taking any major steps. Additionally, I'm diligently studying and noting the divorce laws in my state. In time, I'll turn to legal professionals for advice and assistance. I've sought advice and recommendations from friends who have recently gone through a divorce, and their opinions will undoubtedly prove valuable in this challenging situation. I've also made the decision to take DNA samples from my 3 children, not because of doubt, but solely for my peace of mind. Regardless of the results, my love for them remains unchanged. As for what I'm waiting for, it's a combination of collecting enough evidence and finding the courage to acknowledge the reality of our situation. The realization that our relationship is beyond repair is becoming more and more evident, and I know I have to face it head on. Facing this harsh reality remains a daunting task, and I still struggle to confront it. Furthermore, I can't help but have a strong reluctance to expose my children to the turmoil of a divorce, despite them being older. Their well-being and emotional stability mean a lot to me, and I hesitate to subject them to the challenges and uncertainties that come with such significant life changes. Until the situation becomes entirely clear, I find myself in a peculiar position where part of me strangely takes some painful pleasure in listening to her conversations recorded on a dictaphone. This allows me to stay informed about recent events, such as her decision to unfriend a lot of people over the past couple of days. Yes, I admit I was spying in this regard, which understandably upset her. I'm well aware that my actions won't be seen positively, but it's important to note that for the past year or so, she's been going through what I'd call a midlife crisis. She also lost her mother in November, which deeply affected her emotional state and made our already challenging circumstances even more difficult. Just 2 days after her mother's passed away, we tragically lost my father. Within 3 weeks, we lost 2 more relatives. Amid all this grief, Christmas came. A series of misfortunes befell our family, and we experienced immense sorrow. I completely understand how these losses have profoundly affected her. Somewhere deep within me, a thought occurred. Maybe her current state of mind is a result of these recent events, and perhaps I should try to create some separation between the pain caused by these losses and the additional mental anguish a divorce would bring. I'm willing to make that sacrifice to prioritize the well-being of my children and loved ones. I've made the tough choice to exercise patience a bit longer before rushing into decisions. Ending a 26-year-long relationship is far from simple, especially when you consider the intense love I felt for this woman throughout most of our marriage, a love that often consumed me. I can't deny the power of these emotions. I'm currently planning to spend this week searching for divorce lawyers, but I'm also aware that my daughter has a birthday next Sunday, so I decided to talk to her after the event. Though I'm not certain about the exact words I'll use, I intend to let her know I'm actively seeking a lawyer by then. I hope that by that time I'll have found a suitable lawyer and be ready to initiate the divorce process. While I hope there might be a moment of realization and reflection on her part, I've reached the point where I no longer want to continue our marriage, given the strong evidence I've gathered of her extramarital affair. On February 11th, 2022, I discreetly installed a voice recorder in her car. Interestingly, listening to the recorded conversations has given me a deeper understanding of what transpired after the incident. I've chosen to mentally prepare for potential consequences that may manifest soon. To combat my insomnia, I decided to use sleep aids for a restful night's sleep. Additionally, I've redirected my nervous energy into returning to the gym. Regarding my decreased appetite, I aim to shed a few extra pounds I gained during my absence from training. To address concentration issues, I've made it a practice to diligently jot down crucial information and mentally review the exact sequence of steps for everyday tasks I might forget. Finally, I've been troubled by night sweats, and I'm actively seeking remedies for that. When I stumbled upon these events, I quickly realized that this was another aspect that needed attention. I promptly collected some towels, t-shirts, and underwear and piled them up next to the bed. I assumed that handling these things, particularly during the cold winter months, could be especially challenging. After this initial reaction, a sense of relief washed over me. I no longer had to constantly hide, playing the roles of spies or investigators in our own marriage. I wouldn't need to tiptoe around sensitive topics to avoid upsetting her. Even before I had the chance to express my concerns, I understood that in recent months, she'd been acting as though everything was fine, and this only intensified her frustration. When I finally revealed everything to her, receiving a box of her deceased mother's belongings from her father was a significant moment, but I surprisingly felt unaffected by it. Watching her reaction during our subsequent argument didn't evoke sympathy, sorrow, or sadness in me. After persistent persuasion and prodding, she finally asked, "What's wrong? Tell me what's bothering you." I simply mentioned his name. I noticed her excitement before she rushed out of the house. At that moment, a weight lifted from my shoulders. I no longer worried about her presence or felt tense, as if I had to meet certain expectations or continually update her on my activities. As for recent events, something seemed amiss. Everything was going too smoothly for us, almost unnaturally so. Her unexpected kindness towards me raised suspicion. I noticed a peculiar change in her behavior. Things that would typically annoy her suddenly stopped bothering her. Initially, I viewed it as a sign of her newfound happiness. But an uneasy feeling gnawed at me, and I decided to take on the role of a vigilant observer. Imagining myself in metaphorical black sunglasses and a raincoat, I became a marriage detective. I discreetly installed a voice recorder in her car and activated the GPS navigation system. Casting a metaphorical fishing line, I was amazed to catch something on the first attempt. The recording contained 2 phone calls, the first of which indicated her intention to meet with him. Their meeting took place in a church parking lot and lasted about 40 minutes. Fortunately, I was spared the need to listen to their communication. While she walked to his car, she made a subsequent phone call to her trusted friend living on the other side of the country, who served as her confidant. If talking to him wasn't enough to confirm my suspicions, and I have no doubt about it, I could find additional evidence in this call. But if I truly wanted to remain in the dark, then her call to him would be decisive. The subsequent conversation between us followed a familiar pattern characteristic of her. She tried to downplay or deny her involvement in the betrayal, shifting the blame to another. It's my mistake that she harbored a grudge about missed opportunities in her life. Before our marriage, she didn't have the opportunity to go to college or lead a carefree bachelor life. Regrettably, I take responsibility for this, and she holds some resentment towards me. I've already conveyed to her that if she wishes to end our relationship, I will understand. Yet she's chosen to stay, making it clear that her betrayal is entirely her own decision. While I acknowledge my flaws as a husband, it's important to recognize that I wasn't married to a flawless individual either. The notion that I have an ideal wife seems undeserved in my case. Consequently, I've reached out to divorced women I know for lawyer recommendations and strategic guidance. I've come to the realization that it's time to bring this to a close. My wife, who has withdrawn from our relationship, has demonstrated her lack of commitment to reconciliation. I'm unwilling to subject myself to the risk of potential future betrayals. Hence, I'm leaning towards a divorce. Are there any specific tips or techniques I should acquaint myself with during this process? I'm still engulfed in a whirlwind of emotions. In a moment of acute disappointment, I impulsively struck the wall with my fist, fortunately causing no negative influence to myself or the building. In the empty house's confined space, I vented my pent-up emotions, shouting a curse word at the top of my lungs. Thankfully, no one was present to witness this outburst. During a vulnerable moment, I couldn't hold back tears and broke down during a phone conversation with my best friend. In that state, I began to daydream about a beautiful reconciliation, hoping that everything would miraculously fall back into place in my relationship with my wife. I wondered if it would be so terrible if we managed to salvage our relationship with a little more effort on my part, granting her happiness. However, deep down, I recognize that these thoughts are mere false hopes, and divorce is the right path. I've repeated this to my mother, to the friends I've confided in, and to myself countless times since the betrayal came to light. We've largely been avoiding each other, and during those moments, I keenly feel her absence. Changing our dynamics has proven to be incredibly challenging. We used to exchange text messages during the day at work, checking in on each other, sharing updates during breaks, and having light conversations. Casual hugs and kisses were commonplace. But now, back at home, all of that has ceased. As mentioned before, we actively steer clear of each other within our home. She's chosen to sleep on the couch instead of our bed. Previously, one of my simple morning joys was gently waking her up. When the alarm went off, I'd roll over onto my back, stroke her back or arm, and softly whisper, "Hey, honey, it's time." Unfortunately, those bed-life moments are a thing of the past. Every morning, I'd wake her up with a gentle touch and a nearly inaudible whisper that always brought a smile to my face. Despite the circumstances, she hasn't left, and we haven't officially separated. But deep down, I understand what needs to be done. Though I know it won't be an easy journey, I find solace in the hope that a glimmer of light awaits me at the end of this long, dark, and lonely tunnel. It's distressing to witness her envy of our children, who have opportunities to travel and participate in exciting events through their involvement in the school musical group. It's essential to note that neither she nor I had the chance to experience these opportunities ourselves. I find joy in witnessing my children's happiness and the opportunities they have, which I didn't. Over the past 2 decades, I've dedicated my time to participating in a fairly well-known local band, which has allowed me to perform at some wonderful events. However, my wife is envious of these opportunities. She disregards the countless hours of practice and study I've put into reaching a level that allows me to pursue this hobby. Curiously, she often shares stories with me about people she encountered at work who heard or followed our music. It appears that she takes pride in being married to a man who attracts attention. One day, my wife expressed her displeasure, stating that I leave her alone with the children when I go to play. Yet, it's important to note that I worked and came home with earnings in my pocket. While I enjoyed my time, there's no denying that performing music in front of an audience can be incredibly exhilarating. I had to handle concert arrangements, communicate with bar owners, maintain a flawless rhythm, and gauge audience reactions. Despite the fatigue that late-night performances brought, I'd still wake up at 5 in the morning for a full day's work. Balancing these responsibilities made the day challenging and lengthy, but it was necessary because we needed the income to build the house she desired. Leaving the band wasn't a viable option, as it was a significant source of income for me. It's worth noting that she had her own job, but my earnings from performances were comparable to what she made from her steady job. Furthermore, this situation infuriated her, as it turned out that my real job paid 3 to 4 times more than hers. I made it my mission to provide my family with the life I believed they deserved. However, instead of gratitude, all I received was resentment. The age-old saying, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them," rang true in my case. Unfortunately, it took me far too long to understand the true nature of the man I married. Consequently, I've arrived at the same conclusion. If we continue to stay together, I'd essentially be subscribing to another cycle of frustration and dissatisfaction. In this regard, I've gathered recommendations for several lawyers and will be scheduling appointments with them in the near future. Unfortunately, I don't see a viable solution or future for our relationship. Divorce may not be an immediate outcome, but it has become evident that there is no foundation for salvaging our relationship. Paradoxically, those who know her outside of our home perceive her as a wonderful person, a warm, caring, exceptional mother who consistently assists others, and I can confirm that she genuinely fulfills these roles. But within our family, reality differs from perception. She exhibits the traits I described earlier. It appears that she has succumbed to what I refer to as the palm syndrome. This individual is her coworker who, as it turns out, is married to another coworker. I haven't shared this information with her family yet. As far as I know, her father and his sister are the only relatives she has left. Although I don't communicate with them very often, I intend to inform her father at some point. I've also reached out to the wife of the man who betrayed us, but unfortunately she hasn't responded. If I don't receive a reply, I'll send another email in a couple of days with more details, and then I'll respect her decision if she chooses not to engage further. Tonight, I gathered the courage to talk to my wife about wanting a divorce. Hugs and tears, the bed life moments we once shared, are now a thing of the past. Thankfully, she understood the gravity of the situation. We engaged in a bittersweet conversation, reminiscing about how we wished things could be different. Summoning the courage, I asked her a tough question. Did you not consider this outcome when you made this choice? She admitted she was aware but remained deeply upset. It's painful to witness her suffering. Despite my deep love for this woman, I've come to the realization that I can't continue this relationship. It's a choice I don't want to make, but it's necessary. I believe I'll find solace in the fact that I won't be tied to her anymore. Our band is currently on hold, but I'm actively seeking other musical opportunities, specializing in classic rock with brass elements like Chicago. I eagerly await the day when the difficult path I'm on leads to strength and stability. Though I acknowledge the challenges ahead, I'm confident in my ability to emerge from this in a positive state. While she mentioned the possibility of seeking counseling and reconciliation, I firmly closed that topic and recommended counseling for her own well-being. At this point, I only feel responsible for not ending the relationship sooner. I haven't committed any other wrongs in recent years. On the contrary, I've strived to be a devoted husband, prioritizing her as the most important person in my life. Despite all my efforts, I've found myself in this situation. I'm often torn between wanting to save my marriage and remembering why it's no longer possible. This sadness reinforces my readiness to move on. Although I reached out to another betrayed spouse by email, I didn't receive a response. Following advice from another source, I mustered the courage to call and share the truth. I've never felt so terrible, even though I know I did nothing wrong in conveying the information she needed to know. Watching her heart break, I felt responsible for her suffering. It was like reliving the shock and devastation. Breaking someone's heart, even unintentionally, is incredibly difficult. I assured her that, even though we'd never met in person, I'd be there for her through phone or SMS. Our conversation turned out to be therapeutic for me as well. After discussing our experiences, I have a clearer understanding of the situation. She expressed her gratitude, convincing me that I made the right decision. Despite the complexity of the conversation, I was genuinely interested in hearing her perspective on his behavior. It seems she might have fabricated an unhappy marriage story to gain sympathy and create a closer connection with him. While I acknowledge her involvement in this situation, it's possible she manipulated him by feeding into his desires. My wife is still unaware of this situation. I rejected a man involved in infidelity, which resulted in 2 families being torn apart, leaving 6 children to wonder why their parents caused them such pain. Perhaps comparing salaries would shed light on the situation, but it didn't occur to me at the moment. I've stopped communicating with her and try to avoid being in the same room unless it involves our children or household duties. Recently, there's been a noticeable coldness in our home. It appears she's slowly realizing she's crossed a line. I take measures to protect myself, seeking legal advice and support from friends while planning to move forward. It seems she doesn't fully grasp the seriousness of the situation. To create distance, I limit our conversations to important topics like home, children, and finances. I'd rather not share a room with her. She's starting to comprehend the gravity of the situation, but seems to expect me to either ignore what happened or make a desperate attempt to save our relationship. In the past, I failed to assert my needs and desire to stay together. I settled for apologies and minimal changes. I apologize for my previous passivity, but I'm adopting a different approach now. I've completely changed my behavior, refraining from casual conversations and small talk with her. Those interactions are a thing of the past. She seems to struggle with accepting my decision to let go of various aspects of our relationship. Witnessing this is quite disheartening. She doesn't realize that the issues in our marriage are entirely on her shoulders. I understand that I may never get an answer to the why question. The question why remains. Despite all the challenges, tonight was a positive one. We spent time as a family at an event celebrating my youngest daughter's performance in the school musical, The Best Daughter. She had a significant role and gave an impressive performance. Watching her sing, dance, and savor each moment on stage was heartwarming. During the performance, my wife sat beside my mother, who is aware of our situation. Even though my wife doesn't know what my mother knows, I couldn't help but feel sorry for my mom, who must have been in an awkward position. When I finally told my mom the truth, she was genuinely shocked. She mentioned how we always seemed happy together, and she truly loved my wife like her own daughter. Another person who had experienced betrayal contacted me with a text message during the performance, expressing concern about how I was holding up. This individual's husband, involved in infidelity, was temporarily sent away by another wife. She discovered that he sought refuge with a friend who, as it turned out, was absent. This raised concerns about possible inappropriate behavior. I was relieved to reassure her that her fears were unfounded. However, I'm also plagued by painful memories and obsessive thoughts. Despite my hopes for reconciliation and finding a way to repair our relationship, I'm increasingly convinced that divorce is the most reasonable choice. I understand that under the circumstances this may seem early or uncertain, but continuing the relationship appears completely untenable. The only sensible option right now seems to be divorce, despite my occasional desire to salvage our shattered life and family. Yet these moments of nostalgia and hope are fleeting. They're part of the healing process, but they quickly fade, giving way to the harsh reality that staying with her isn't worthwhile. I see this shift as progress because it makes me question why she, seemingly a normal person raised in a devout Christian family, would engage in such a reprehensible act, contrary to the principles and moral boundaries instilled in her from childhood. Tonight marked a turning point. I followed her to the parking lot where she stood for a while, then went to the store and returned to the parking lot. As I watched from the sidelines, I couldn't help but wonder what was happening. My intuition told me she was with him, prompting me to investigate further. To my shock, I found her car parked next to his. In the process of clarifying the situation, I contacted his wife, with whom I'd been communicating for the past few days. She encouraged me to approach them, introduce myself, and take a photo as evidence. Following her advice, I asked my wife not to return home that evening, and I continued my way home alone. She called me, crying and apologizing. Reluctantly, I agreed to pick up my things, hoping that she would leave for a while. This is how I finally got all the answers, and a new chapter in this turbulent journey began. However, there was an unexpected twist. The DNA test results for my 3 children remained untouched in the mailbox where we kept our mail, and anyone could have taken them. Since I rarely received physical mail, I had forgotten about them. I had always believed all 3 children were mine, but to my astonishment, it turned out that my eldest son was not biologically mine. This revelation surprised me with such force that I was utterly stunned. I hadn't expected such a betrayal, and realizing she must have been unfaithful in the early years of our marriage, my heart was irreparably shattered into countless pieces. I understood that it was necessary to be honest with my children, even if it meant delivering heart-wrenching news. So last night, I mustered the courage to tell my son the truth. It was an emotionally charged moment filled with tight hugs and tears. Meanwhile, my soon-to-be ex-wife was still absent from home after I caught her red-handed in the car with her lover. Though he's not my biological son, I raised him as my own, and he holds a special place in my heart. In his 20s, he grew into a wonderful young man of whom any father could be proud. However, he's not yet ready to confront his mother over her actions. It was with a heavy heart that I made the tough decision to share this news with my soon-to-be ex-wife. I called her on the phone, gathered my strength, and revealed the truth. As expected, she burst into tears and apologized. She wanted to return home, but I firmly advised her to stay where she was for now. Regardless of the DNA results, I reassured myself that he was still my son. Our connection transcends genetics. Throughout this ordeal, I never concealed my love for the children and reminded them of it every day. Surprisingly, now that the truth has come to light, I feel relieved. The constant worry of playing the role of a marriage detective and concerns about her actions are over. This marks a new chapter, free from lies and uncertainty. Finally, I can let go of this burden and breathe a bit easier. Gone are the days when I tiptoed around her, always on edge. It's all behind me now. My children and I have embarked on the path of healing, and though it won't be easy, we've found a sense of peace amid the chaos. In the upcoming days, weeks, and months, we'll undoubtedly experience a range of emotions. But I saw a way out of this darkness until the most tragic thing occurred in our lives with the children. Even though we were all angry with my soon-to-be ex-wife, we felt real sorrow and pain. When we learned of her passing away in a car accident due to brake failure, our world crumbled. It initially appeared to be an accident, but later surveillance cameras revealed that her lover's wife intentionally tampered with the brake lines. While my wife was with her lover and his friend at their house, the other wife broke into the garage and committed this act. She couldn't forgive them for their transgressions. Her involvement in my wife's end of life was confirmed, and she was sentenced to 8 years in prison. As we and the children cope with this devastating loss, it's a challenging journey. Unfortunately, life throws us curveballs, but the key is to get through it and learn from the experience.